In the previous two videos, we've talked about the discussions as well as the various workarounds on managing the consumption of various expired food groups, nearing from over 5 long years worth of self-enquiring. So in this third and last section, we'll be discussing the various dry food groups in which that encompasses broadly from not only foods, but also spices, herbs, herbal condiments, as well as a special topic, we'll also be discussing various micronutrients as well as various ergogenic protein supplements as well as derivative singular amino acid strength supplementation products in more detail. However, more importantly, within that supplement section, we'll also be discussing about the various pragmatic key takeaway points in which, although that is heavily summarized, we'll nevertheless be providing us the much needed pragmatic key takeaway points. Given the sheer information density of this visual presentation, please keep in mind that all readers and or prospective viewers and readers to this concept initiative is not expected to watch the beginning of this presentation and all the way to the end. Hence, this future presentation is only made as a reference viewing purposes only. And hence, as such, it is not made nor it is meant to be for sensationalism, instant gratification purposes. However, it only wishes to encourage and to laterally contemplate upon its viewers and readers to, at the end of the day, scientifically explore and scientifically self-enquire on what they can or cannot do amidst prolonged periods and thematics of structural scarcity, structural violence, and or structural involuntary impositions. First in our list is TVP, or deflated soya chunks, to name a few. This author would say, yes, they can be safe to consume nearing at or beyond their expiry date for up to 1 year beyond their allegedly printed expiry date. This author can specifically recall that during the early years of this concept initiative, in an on and off periodical cyclical fashion, he has actually subsisted within weekly food budgets of less than $20 per week. And such is possible within the realms of using just this TVP, and more recently within the use of soya wadi. As economical as TVP is renowned for their emergency shelter foods, for instance, are they actually viable enough to be used as the only sole source of amino acids and or protein in place of meat-based products? Well, this author would generally say no. It is very difficult to actually summarize the entire reason as to why this author would actually not recommend prolonged, consistent consumptions of soya wadi or TVP. Even though that despite it is not dangerous per se, but it has this somewhat subdued or a muted feeling that this author can only relate to in such a semanticized words. Is it inflammatory? No, but in some individuals it may be. Is it dangerous? No, it's not dangerous. However, is it optimal? Does it make one feel optimal to overall health and physiology? Unfortunately, absolutely not. Once again, this is neither a space nor the time for us to lengthily debate on the nutritive versus the anti-nutritive qualities of soy protein. This author has actually prepared a dedicated blog article explaining and enlightening on how to prepare, or what they call reconstitute, these TVP-based products before they can be cooked further into any other savory-based, meat-based recipes. However, having said that, as a general reminder, does this adverse effects were to be expected throughout all other physiologies and metabolism? Well, unfortunately, that remains an individual self-inquiry. Once again, what this author would generally recommend is such that discerning individuals within decentralized nutritional science would be wise to actually periodize themselves within periods of none, low, and high consumptions of any suspected food groups, including that as TVP and or soya products, and see how they react, whether psychological and or physiological signs of manifestations. Whilst we are talking about TVP and or plant-based meat products, yes, it might be safe to consume, nearing at or beyond their expiry date. We just need to consider the various precautions and conditions that we need to take care of. Number one, make sure that we are not overcooking them to the point of it being glycated and or being charred to the point of charcoal, because unfortunately, many ingredients that's actually featured in many of these products are actually quite heat sensitive already. Those are including but not limited to the protein powders themselves, in which those are consisting of soy protein isolates, pea protein isolates, and or rice bran protein isolates. And on top of that, these may also feature beetroot powders. And to the point of how long and how intentionally we cook this for, well, fortunately, this does not require much cooking at all. Just cook them no more briefly than, say, 5 minutes on a microwave even. Yes, even on a microwave at no more than level 6 or level 7 power level, at no more than 5 or 6 minutes alongside with our vegetables, already we have a ready-to-consume feature meal. Another thing we need to consider is to be mindful of the thickener profiles that's being used. E.g., does it uses the subjectively safer ones such as guar gums and or xanthan gums and or cellulose-based ones. However, if it contains carrageenan products, it may be wise to take caution. Try consuming it in segmented quantities between none, low, and high amounts, and see if any inflammatory symptoms were to persist. Because of the fact that, unfortunately, these short-dated plant-based means products are extremely difficult to come by, because of the fact that they are extremely expensive to begin with. Considering, and to put this to perspective, that original retail pricing of these products actually run as high as $12 or even $15 per kilogram, in which that is paradoxically very, very expensive, considering just how mundane and how basic the ingredient profile is, considering that they consist nothing more than spices, dried vegetable oils, and the thickeners that's involved, whether it's cellulose-based and or other thickeners that's used, whether it's guar gums, xanthan gums, to name a few. And lastly, the protein powders themselves, in which those are consisting of either soy protein, pea protein, and or rice protein isolates. So hence, unfortunately, take this opinion and this review for what it is. Your opinion and your experiences may yet vary. Spices and herbal flavor mixes. Generally speaking, these are actually safe to consume. These particular spices, in which it is specifically as lemon pepper seasoning, it is now counting to this date, to the date of this video recording, already now amounts to, say, 1.5 years old ever since its initial purchases. And it still remains viable and good to use. One thing to keep in mind is such that for as long as these dry herb condiments are not mixed with, say, vegetable oils that we've just previously tried to avoid, e.g. the cottonseed oil, soybean oil, and then it is generally safe to consume nevertheless, only in minor quantities. Generally speaking, herbs are nonetheless safe to consume, even after they are short-dated and or having their sale prices reduced from 75% to 90% of their regular pricing. For as long as it doesn't taste or smell rancid to the point whereby it smells sour, and or the fact that for as long as they still retain that fragrant aroma, then it is still nevertheless safe to consume. Whether it be basil, oregano, sage, rosemary, or thyme, even though consuming them at their semi-darkening of their color seems to so far exhibited no adverse symptoms. However, one thing to keep in mind, just to be pragmatically safe, is such that not rely on using them so much in high temperature cooking, just so that we can ensure the antioxidant capability and functionality remains intact. Coffee is a worthy one to consider and to discuss because not everyone, including this author, agrees that expired coffee products are safe to consume. To be quite specific, this author can actually note from experience that coffee capsule products, especially coming from the dark espresso roast beans, seem to unfortunately exert unsettling symptoms, be like light-hearted symptoms. It may not be to the point of being painful, but it is noticeable as such that it will be wise to minimize its consumption altogether. Despite the fact that various publications and mass media journalism seems to instill the idea that it is safe to consume even years after their expiry date. However, again, many confounders need to be taken into account. Are these coffee beans remains dry in their original state? Have they been in contact with any moisture? And more importantly, in which unfortunately it is somewhat unavoidable, have they been exposed to oxygen and or air in general? So unfortunately, to be safe, it is wise for the readers and viewers to actually just try taking in no more than 2 cups a day, especially if one practicing an intermittent fasting regimen, and see how they react to expired coffee products. Some individuals may exert symptoms more than others. Artificial sweeteners is a rather interesting subject to consider. Now, unfortunately, this author has not had much experiences when it comes to consuming and or using artificial-based sweeteners that have been long beyond at or near their expiry dates. However, when it comes to the natural-based ones, there are 2 case studies as examples that he would like to share. The first of which, here in this case, is a natural certified organic-based stevia leaf powder, in which, interestingly enough, for this particular batch has been left under prolonged dry storage for as long as 2 long years beyond their expiry date, as printed as April of 2018. Now, considering the making and the releasing of this video initiative have been such that this has been used sparingly, but not a lot, in various dessert-based low-carbohydrate recipes, and as well as a few other recipes as well, with with seemingly no digestive impairment effects or malaise or stomach aches. However, once again, individual responses, experiences, and gut settings and overall immunology status will likely differ in terms of experiences. Now, that is for stevia. That is when it comes to the organic certified. And another case example is Luhan Guo, or known as the monk fruit. Much like stevia, this author has had experience, for the record, of consuming, just like stevia, liberal amounts of it being used in various dessert recipes so far for as long as 1.5 years beyond their expiry date, which unfortunately this author no longer has had the packaging. However, he has confidence based from memory, that monk fruit, for as long as they are kept under dry storage conditions, is likely still safe to consume, nearing at or beyond their expiry date for as long as 1.5 years and counting to this very day. As reassuring as these experiences may seem to all readers and viewers, one pragmatic key takeaway when it comes to assessing whether or not a spice, or in this case natural-based sweeteners, are still safe to consume is to assess their both taste as well as smell profile to ensure that they still remain quite similar to licorice-like aftertaste and profiling. Hence, if either the stevia or the monk fruit still tastes and smells like licorice, then this author can only presume and speculate that it is nevertheless still safe to consume. The jury, however, may still remain unconclusive on determining the heat stability. That is, how well does this herbal extracts may actually be able to withstand against prolonged high temperature cooking conditions. Now, despite the fact that yes, some studies seems to reassuringly suggest that under ambient storage conditions, stevia extracts have been studied to have lasted for more than 5 years. However, it needs to be said and re-examined as such that when it is actually subject under cooking conditions, that particular study actually found that at 1 hour duration at very high temperature cooking conditions of 140 degrees seems to be the cut-off threshold before any degradation of the sweetness profiling begins to suffer. Now, compared to monk fruits, however, in particular, there appears to be a sentiment and a finding which discloses that monk fruit seems to be more heat stable and more resistant against prolonged heating conditions. That particular study seems to suggest that yes, it seems to be safe under such prolonged heating-like conditions. However, this author would pretty much speculate that nobody would be willing nor having the desire to cook these herbal extracts under such prolonged condition, despite if readers and individuals are contemplating to construct and to produce highly intricate dessert-based recipes. This author would highly doubt that that one would actually be compulsive to similarly undergo such prolonged heat treatment for up to 6 hours. We may have to even just consider serving these herbal extracts, powders, and or liquid forms only under room temperature conditions, nothing more and or nothing less beyond that. Dairy milk powders, protein powders, and that includes whey protein powders. Now, unfortunately, this will require some more subjective research and more stringent individual self-enquiry for a number of reasons, and as such that individual responses, immunological support, immunological status, and overall gut existing makeup will all serve as confounding factors. Nevertheless, we're going to go through this one by one, in which, however, unfortunately, as much as this author may conclude that many dairy products, especially within their powdered forms, may not be a good idea. Starting with whey protein concentrates and or powders, in which this author may safely conclude out of his own and equals one self-enquiring thus far, is such that whey protein concentrates and in some extent whey protein isolates may not be a good idea to consume, after all, nearing at or beyond their expiry dates. And once again, this is actually quite surprising because of the fact that this author has had many years of reliance and dependence on various whey protein supplementations over many years. Unfortunately, some inflammatory symptoms do arise when it comes to him actually consuming semi-expired whey protein products, especially even if they are just nearing at their expiry dates. E.g., we're talking about less than a week before the allegedly expired printed dates on the label, in which inflammatory symptoms such as heartburn-like symptoms soon after consumptions are repeatedly noted over and over and over again. Does these experiences will constitute the same throughout all other physiologies? Please consider for the fact that individual gut settings, immunological status are all, nevertheless, strong confounding factors. So far, throughout this video presentation, we've been discussing surrounding expired foods, but not supplementations. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to supplementation, this is somewhat of a subjective gray area because it will wildly differs from the type of supplementation, the ingredient profiling, and most of all, obviously also on the individual immunological and gut settings overall, in which unfortunately this author will not be able to subjectively say nor objectively confide whether or not this will be safe or not safe, given that his own experiences seems to wildly fluctuate from one type of product to another. So we are going to go through this one by one. Yes, it may be safe. Yes, it might be safe to consume expired vitamins and or mineral products. However, they do actually imposes a further warning in such that the overall potency of each of these supplementations may suffer. Now, this, interestingly enough, raises another question whether or not the ingredients profile are actually the ones that have undergone certain oxidations. There seems to be official medical claims as such that apparently various supplementations, whether it's vitamins and minerals, have been tested. We're not just talking about mere days or months, we are talking about years beyond their manufacturing date of production at the very least. At the very least, that is what has been officially been documented and recorded in amidst official notices. Nevertheless, there is still a few key examples that this author would like to share. First and foremost is to do with inotropics, or supplementations that surrounds the concerns of maintaining physiological as well as psychological health and well-being. none other than L-car, or to be expanded as acetylated L-carnitine. Now, this particular purchased product, which was actually purchased all the way back since 2018, has so far not produced any gastric and or adverse symptoms. However, again, to remain in agreement with official sentiments and official research surrounding expired supplementations in general, seems to agree that yes, that the overall potency of these alcar, specifically alcar supplements, seems to somewhat lessen over time. Now, once again, this can be perceived as subjective and or placebo limitation, as such that it may be the fact that it may be due to over tolerance over time. Well, keeping in mind that this author is not overly reliant on the usage of L-car and or any other enotropic supplementations in general, in such that this author would only use L-car actually sparingly in times of very high strenuous episodes of stress, whether it is exercise-induced stress and or prolonged looming anticipation of low inflammation grade of stress, whether that is comprised of environmental and or sociological situations and circumstances. That is sociological interactions, and it means that, as to put it bluntly, as examples, prolonged job interviews, liaisons or liaising with various unknown and or unacquainted individuals, figures, and the like. But so far, when it comes to L-car, this author would say that yes, it would be safe to consume, especially beyond their expiry date. However, once again, in summary, keeping in mind that the overall potency may yet suffer in the long run. Unfortunately, this author would say no, it would not be safe to consume this particular singular L-citrulline malate nearing at or beyond their expiry date. In this case here is a 2 years old expiry date of L-citrulline malate, in which it has become, the powder itself has become hardened to the point whereby it may be difficult to take appropriate dosages. This author actually can proclaim various negative side effects, and which more or less amounts that as the usual heartburn and or inflammatory like symptoms. It may not be immediately imposed or induced inflammatory symptoms per se, but it seems to be quite delayed as such a response, as such that it's only within the range of within 30 minutes or up to an hour before the signs can be felt. Unfortunately, we can only safely conclude that based on this author's N=1 self-enquiring, unfortunately, L-citrulline malate is unfortunately not very safe to consume nearing at or beyond their expiry dates. So, unfortunately, when it comes to zinc, this author would say no, because of the fact that this author actually noted some inflammatory symptoms that is noted as not immediately per se, but only within the hour of consumption. This particular product, which is Genovis Zinc Plus, have been purchased almost 1.5 years ago, and as according to this label, it has been expired since October 2019. This opinion is likely, unfortunately, may change over time because of the fact that this opinion is only derived from preliminary thoughts. However, in the meantime, this author would pragmatically say no. So unfortunately, there is still much more that needs to be deservedly discussed. However, due to the unfortunate limited time span of this video presentation, we're only going to go through the various key pragmatic takeaways for us to consider. Vitamins A, D, E, and as well as those that contains fatty acids as a delivery vehicle, such as omega-3, 6, 9 fatty acids. Supplementations might not be a good idea to consume because of the fact that these lipid delivery vehicles within them may be prone to lipid peroxidation over time. However, the jury is still out on whether or not the saturated fat stable versions of delivery vehicles, e.g., that would be more commonly be suspected as MCT and or coconut oil derivatives, might be the safer delivery vehicle as prolonged storage. So unfortunately, more research needs to be undertaken in that regard, in which unfortunately this author, to the best of this author's awareness, there has not been very few to no studies that actually have discussed such a longevity effects on micronutrients and supplementary contingencies longevity. Next is sugar-based chewables for kids and children. If readers and viewers watching this are actually responsible caretakers of children and or young kids who would otherwise be reliant upon sugar-based chewables such as gummy bears and or the like of sugar-based chewable supplements, would not be a good idea because of the fact that these chewable supplements are more readily absorbable to take in more moistures than their dried counterparts. So hence, it might not be a good idea for overall to consume this in the long run, especially nearing at or beyond their expiry date. Next, water-soluble vitamins. It is interesting to note that some studies seem to suggest and finds that several water-based vitamins such as vitamin B, thiamines, and ascorbic acids are actually more prone to degradations. So when it comes to assessing whether or not it is safe to consume these water-based supplements nearing at or beyond their expiry date, this author would say no. And lastly, as always, we just need to exercise our due diligence at exercising and maintaining proper storage, handling, and conditions. That is, making sure that these supplements are actually stored as far away from exposures to prolonged heat, prolonged humidity, and or any excess moisture conditions. And one thing that we can keep in mind and to always exercise is to make sure that desiccant agent and or those moisture absorbent packets are always placed securely inside the bottle and or the supplement packaging at all times. So, finally, that wraps up and concludes the last and final part of our discussion on how to manage, handling, as well as considering the various workarounds at consuming various expired food groups. Should prospective readers and or viewers have actually made it reading this far, then this author would only like to express his very heartfelt, sincere gratitude that they have actually taken the time, however time it takes, to both properly understood as well as take things into their own pragmatic account so that they can learn and therefore to be able to hopefully begin their self-enquiring journey towards their own metabolic and physiological exploration for self-resilience amidst all periods of prolonged scarcity. It does not have to be involuntarily imposed to that as structural violence and or structural impositions. It could be simply out of sincere self-discipline. It can also be sincerely out of pragmatic survival need, whatever the case may be. As a clear-cut disclaimer, once again, your mileage, your physiological experiences may yet vary. This author does not own anyone else's individual gut settings, physiology, immunological status, and or other nutrigenomic factors yet to be accounted for other than his own N=1 self-enquiring experiences amidst prolonged, involuntarily structural violence. Hence, having said that, nobody, absolutely nobody, including this author alone, actually takes the pleasure for consuming repeated consumptions of these expired food products repeatedly over and over and over again. It remains debatable whether or not immunological status may yet differ through time and through, as accordingly to the readers and individual age settings overall, biological age settings overall. So hence, further guidances, if any, and or applicable by existing terminal supervisions may yet be the most advisable to follow and to pragmatically abide to in the meantime. Once again, in the interest for us to actually reconcile our authenticity, we have to self-enquire, of course, on what we can or cannot do. To bravely inquire our own state of resilience amidst prolonged periods of resource scarcity. And unfortunately, there is no other way other than to testify the physiology, the overall gut settings overall under these variable conditions. So hence, in closing, exercise your self-enquiring, exercise your self-resilience, exercise and scrutinize your own existing abilities ecosystems against that of your outside and larger liabilities ecosystems. And remember, at the end of the day, it is all about living it forward, living it authentically forward from one day to the next, with as fewer and or lesser resources, as far away from scientific authoritarianism, and as well as consequently to that as quantified paternalism. Thank you for watching.